Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Venom. I think part of the thing with Venom is that we all understood before this is probably not going to be very good. Although I do go into movies with an open mind, I think the thing with Venom is that kind of helped it. Because I've seen bad comic book movies for a long time, since the 90s and everything. I actually saw Steel on the big screen because it was like a special preview thing and I had a pass and stuff. And I remember thinking, oh well, it's a comic book movie. I remember seeing Spawn, which I guess this movie has the closest proximity to or something, and thinking the same thing. So Venom is sort of expected in its terribleness. Like, you kind of are used to, you know, a superhero movie not being able to acknowledge the larger universe it fits in, not being able to talk about the context that actually created the character in the first place, having to kind of change things and put different characters in there and not have other things, and, you know, not have Spider-Man or the Marvel Universe or any references to it. So you kind of just accept those things at this point. And I've seen enough of those where I'm like, yeah, you know, I know how you guys do these things, whatever. At first, the beginning of the movie is probably the worst part. It's really horrible. It's like people using Facebook quotes of the day and just lines you've heard from other Hollywood movies or something. You know, like, have a nice life, and like, there's never a can't, or something that people who have no personality say to each other and act like is really deep. That's like most of the beginning of Venom. And then when it keeps going along in its kind of like bad comic book adaptation way, almost like if you were going to write a genre bad comic book adaptation, that would be Venom, at the beginning at least. But then when Tom Hardy and Venom kind of come together, the movie it's kind of weird, because it's like Tom Hardy, who's been poised to take on like a big franchise for a while, never really has, even though he's been in big movies. I think everyone thinks he could be a movie star. Finally, like, kind of really brings it in a real movie star way. Like, he's having fun playing Venom, him and the symbiote talking to one another, doing more physical comedy. This is the first time I've seen him be in a big kind of blockbuster movie and really want to be a movie star. He is good in Mad Max Fury Road, but that's not like I really want to be in a big star vehicle thing. That was more of the franchise. This is more like he's the lead of the thing. We're promoting him. You're all going to see him in this thing. It's all about his performance, his character. Particularly modern comic book movies are all about the main character and you falling in love with that character. And in that way, he really actually brings it. Like, I actually liked seeing Tom Hardy with the symbiote. Like, when him and the symbiote would leave, I'd be like, oh man, this movie's gonna suck again. I mean, it sucks already, but like, suck in that way that just is not interesting way, instead of the way that's like, oh, this is kind of weird and stupid, but I'm kind of like sort of not bored by it. And I think that's the thing that kind of works for Venom, is Tom Hardy really sort of wills this film into being at least kind of watchable and not completely bored by it. I mean, there's only a few times I thought about like bills I should pay and things I had to do, and then when he was going, I was like, oh, that's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of interesting, like how much he physically is able to bring it, how much charm he's able to do with that. The problem is, this is directed by Ruben Fleischer, who, like, really honestly has never been good, and I've never really liked him. I know his big movie was Zombieland, which is like, and mainly gets along by having like a lot of good performances and good actors in it, and not necessarily because that movie is really good. You know, if it was America's answer to Shaun of the Dead, it was probably America should maybe shut up. It felt like in Zombieland he really was trying to bring it, and then his other movies, which were 30 minutes or less, and Gangster Squad, those are both pretty bad. And even though the beginning of 30 minutes or less is actually a pretty cool sequence, the rest is not great. He always felt like just a boring studio director who maybe was good in the room and good in an interview, but really never had that much personality as a director. I doubt you could even tell that the guy who directed Zombieland directed this. You can definitely tell the guy who directed Gangster Squad directed this, but that's another thing. I think he's just become a boring, lifeless studio yes man and just gotten rid of any personality he even had, which I don't think was very strong to begin with. And that's really what hurts this film. You know, having a good lead and a good charismatic actor to lead these kind of superhero films is one thing, but you also actually do have to have a good director, and he just really isn't. You know, he was good at, I guess, doing what the studio wanted, and even though that seemed to change a lot and it kind of hinted at other genres but didn't really understand what it was doing, like having the symbiote move from person to person and then do this other thing, and having other symbiote. I mean, it's just like kind of what you expect from these kind of crappy movies. It also kind of reminded me, the thing with the symbiote story is that Spider-Man got this symbiote suit from Secret Wars. The problem is you don't have that setup in any of these other adaptations. So in cartoons and movies and so forth, they always have to come up with like a different way for the symbiote to exist. And they don't even tell the symbiote story in the right way. It's sort of the Venom symbiote thing in terms of media reminds me a lot of what happened with the Dark Phoenix saga, where Venom isn't part 1. Venom is like part 2, part 3. There has to be another story to set up the suit, and then you do Venom. So, frankly, I mean, it would have made a lot of sense if, you know, when Spider-Man, spoilers to the obvious, comes back from the snap, suddenly has a black suit, there you go, bada bing, bada boom. You got your black suit movie, you get rid of the black suit, then you do Venom. It's really easy. You don't put Venom in the black suit movie, we already know how that's gonna go. These things need to be structured correctly. You know, the idea that they can keep doing it this way is something I don't understand. The only symbiote thing I've ever liked, other than the, you know, comics, is the Spectacular Spider-Man one that really got the idea that the symbiote was evil, and then you get Venom. You don't do that at the same time, and having Venom just be the origin story doesn't really work at all. You know, it just doesn't flow as well. They really lost something by doing it this way. You could have had some interesting stuff with Tom Holland in the black suit, but instead you have to do this dumb Venom thing first. It just feels like what all bad superhero cinematic universes do, which is kind of just rush to the thing that they want to do and not properly build it, even though the source material shows you need to do that, but clearly they don't really have anything but contempt for the source material, so this is actually what we get. It's incredibly similar to the Dark Phoenix saga, but they just kind of like go to these things so quickly. They just want someone to have the awesome powers. It feels like an idiot writing fan fiction. It doesn't feel like a proper storyteller. And Venom just never really gets into that. You're never like compelled by this story or anything. You're more just like, wow, Tom Hardy's like really wants this movie to work despite like the movie around him. And even like Michelle Williams, I will say Ruben Fleischer understands he has to have a lot of good actors, why they want to work with him. Like this guy got Sean Penn to be in a big studio film 5 years ago or something. I like that this guy clearly was in director's jail for a while and like with good cause. And then like they're like, well, who else will do Venom? Oh, I know, the guy who no one will hire. We'll do that. That'll be cool. None of the action sequences are very good or have many stakes to them or have a distinct style to them, you know? There's kind of a scene or two from Into the Spider-Verse after this, and I was shocked. I was like, oh my god, good staging and an action sequence. I can tell what's going on, and that like I kind of like means something to me. In this, it's like he does a scene that like I've seen both Mandy and the first Purge do, where you have lots of smoke and people shooting at you, and he can't manage to do a simple like silhouette kind of thing, you know? And this film had, you know, cost how much money? It's like a pretty easy thing to do, and it has kind of a surreal quality to it. Venom's fucking black, so it would have looked awesome. And like while I was watching the scene, it just looked like they just covered it up so they could get away with this scene really quickly, and you couldn't tell what was going on. A lot of the action sequences were completely incoherent, and because of that, it's not really any stakes to them. It's just like explosion, explosion, explosion. Oh cool, Venom lived, is like all of the action sequences in this film. Venom can be a really cool character if you get it right. But okay, that's the thing. Venom isn't actually a great character. He's kind of like, oh no, the symbiote became this thing. You're not giving him the reason to exist. And it's like this 90s, very 90s kind of a thing. And it feels like a 90s movie, basically. Because when you get down to it, with, you know, all the things they had to change, all the things they had to adapt, all this film really wants is to somehow work despite not being able to tell its source material in the way that was obviously done before. They're not changing these things like Stanley Kubrick made The fucking Shining. They're changing these things because they have to. They don't have a reason to change them, and they can't find a reason to change them in a very organic way. It's just like you can tell that they changed these things even if you didn't know the source material. I don't know like why it had such a good cast with Michelle Williams to Riz Ahmed to Jenny Slate to Tom Hardy as well. In some ways, yes, it definitely does feel like, you know, Catwoman and things like that, but it just really just feels like a generic bad comic book movie. I think because Tom Hardy actually sort of definitely gave a shit, maybe it's not as bad as Fantastic Four, I guess, or Amazing Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man 3, but it's not like a good movie. It's just mainly a bad movie that somehow, through its rejiggering and Tom Hardy kind of caring and wanting to do something different with it, they kind of made a really bad movie feel sort of passable. When you're leaving, you're like, yeah, but that was actually just bad. And that's Venom, and a bad idea that Avi Arad has had like ever since, you know, the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie and has really wanted. It feels like a studio idea that they just would not let go of. There are some movies that languish in development and a studio executive just wants to get made, and despite, you know, everyone telling him and common sense that, hey, that's like sort of a bad idea, please don't do that, they keep trucking along with it. And somehow Venom is a hit. Everyone's fine with it. Some people liked it. I don't really get that. It doesn't feel like a film that like wants to get the audience over to its side, which I think is something that the MCU is very good at, and other superhero films or Wonder Woman or like the major successes of this kind of superhero genre have been able to get people over who were like, you know what, I don't like superhero films, but I am into this. And Venom is not that at all. You know, it's for people who still like, you know, 90s extreme stuff. But the funny thing is all that 90s Liefeld, McFarlane, Jim Lee, you know, all that shit was all about having striking visuals. You know, there's a reason everybody freaked out about those artists, especially McFarlane. McFarlane always had these incredibly cool splash pages and things like that. And Venom doesn't live up to that. This movie doesn't really want to be a Venom movie. It just wants the tagline of Venom on it, and like even the end where they go in a rocket or something just feels like, I don't know, we need a big thing at the end of the movie, like just put an explosion. I don't really give a shit. Pretty much sort of comes out of nowhere. Even the big antagonist comes out of nowhere. There could be, you know, a fun enough stupid Venom movie, but this is just frankly stupid with a Tom Hardy really trying to bring it kind of performance. You know, it was actually the only time I've seen him do a studio film where he actually looked like he wanted to be a movie star. He was doing his mumbly thing that worked for him, and he was very charismatic. This is the first time I've really seen him really try through this weird, odd performance to really captivate you and maybe want to see him in something else. I've always liked Tom Hardy. I do really feel like he brought it in this, but the rest of this movie just did not really know what it was doing other than making a big, expensive movie. And I guess it did that, and I guess that's what we got. Venom is just another kind of forgettable sort of blockbuster that kind of willed itself, clawed itself like the symbiote attached to Eddie Brock to be something more. And maybe that's sort of remarkable in a way, but it's still, when you look at it, go, yeah, but you're fucking awful. And that's kind of how you walk away from it, just realizing the mistake this whole movie was. So if you have seen Venom and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.